ask you about on this run you guys are on, the continued development of Uzan and what you're seeing. I mean, especially last several games, 6, 7 games during the streak, he's protecting the basketball. His turnover ratio is really good. What have you seen in his development into this system now that you're into a chunk of the season now?
I just think him being understanding first of all, the execution. There's a difference in running a play and executing the play. I think early on he knew how to run the play, but I don't think he knew what the other four guys' responsibilities were. And he's learned to hit singles. I think we've led the nation in at least once, maybe twice, in the fewest turnovers per game. We've had a simple formula around here for a long time: defend, rebound, take care of the ball. That'll keep you in or give you a chance to win most games. But Milos is getting comfortable, and he's getting comfortable in his own skin too. He's realized that he's not replacing anybody. It's a new team, but he's a giver, and he's a prideful kid. He wants to do well. When he makes his mistakes now, he right away it clicks. I should have done this. Oh yeah. That's right. I got to do this. So he's just getting more comfortable and understanding better.
Thank you, Randy. We'll go to Terrence. Thank you. We'll go to Terrence Harris with the Houston Defender. Terrence, please go ahead.
Hey, Coach, how you doing?
Good, Terrence.
Hey, this is a little bit off of the directly basketball, but we're working on some stories on volunteerism and athletes, and I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about what kind of encouragement, if any, do you give your players in terms of getting out in the community, doing things in the community, so that people see them in a different light.
Yeah, that's right. That's right down our alley. We do a lot. My wife, I think, made 20 quilts, handmade 20 quilts. And we went to Children's Hospital to the what do you call it? The little babies or the children that were sick with cancer. We did that this summer. And then there's also a place off of Old Spanish Trail where it's kind of like McDonald's house. When families come in and they can't afford to stay in hotels, they have a place where families can stay while their family members receiving cancer treatment. I think we bought 50 or 60 pizzas and everything to go with it. And the thing I was proud of with our kids went around to each table and took the time to ask about their stories and find out what type cancer it is and how long you've been here. We actually invited a couple of those family members to practice, to watch us practice earlier in October. But Lauren is awesome at that. We do a lot of community service work that way. We get out into schools and do a reading. We have a reading program that we've done. We've been to hospitals on countless occasions. My wife Karen's awesome at that. When we go to Children's Hospital, especially, she always gives us something to give out to the parents. But it's important, Terrence. Does it? The success you have in basketball, or if you have a successful program, that's great. That's great. But the experience that our kids get to see when those kids' eyes light up, we walk into the room and they've got an IV in their arm or their foot or their leg, and the parents has been there for 75 days, waiting on their little girl or little boy to get better. I think it's a valuable lesson that we're playing a sport. It's fun, but there's life that's going on all around us. But I'll say this is that our kids come from such great families.
Yeah.
That they are all awesome in that environment. I can't tell you, Jacob McFarland is just I told him he should go into social work. He's such a giver and a easy communicator. Terrence, parents love Terrence. JoJo, I mean, I could go down the list. LJ, Emmanuel, Big Said, Cordell, and Lauren, and I give all the credit for that to Lauren. She says, "Hey, you want to take our kids to Children's Hospital?" Or she found out about this. It's not called Ronald McDonald's House. I can't remember the name of it, but it's over off of Old Spanish Trail.
Right.
And I think we spent 2 or 3 hours there with those families. And then Lauren takes our kids to different schools here in the Third Ward area, and we read to those children. So our kids get a heavy dose of volunteerism.
And where does that come from within you, Coach? I mean, that understanding and that need to make sure that that the student athletes understand that.
Well, my mother was a RN. She was a nurse. She was a private doctor nurse. She was a hospital nurse, but her last 25 years she spent as a nurse she was director of health services at a university. And then when she retired, she went right into what's the care that when a patient has cancer that can't be cured, is hospice. She went right into hospice care. And when I was traveling with her, my first few years in NBA, she asked me if I would keep all the shampoo, conditioning, lotion, toothpaste, things that we get at all these hotels, and just keep them. And when I came home in the spring when the season's over, she said that goes such a long way to those families when they have little things like that in their room. So I got that from my mother. She was like that. She was and my grandmother, her mother was like that. They would go around and collect clothes, and back then they didn't have donation stations. You would just go around door to door, and my grandmother would go door to door and ask for people if they had clothes that their children had grown out of, because there's some families with kids that can't afford it. So I had good teachers.
Thank you, Coach.
Yeah.
Thank you, Terrence. We'll go to Joseph Duarte from the Houston Chronicle. Go ahead, Joseph.
Good morning, Kelvin.
Morning.
My apologies for the noise in the background. Wanted to ask you, there's so much that goes into your defense and what we see on the court during games. Curious if maybe you peel back the curtain a little bit on where does the buy-in begin first, and then sort of the non-negotiables of how you get to where, with each team, you get to where you are defensively as you go through the season.
What was the first question? Where's the buy-in start?
Well, just where does the buy-in begin, with each team, and how you sell the defensive first approach along with the rebounding and stuff.
Well, I don't want to peel too many layers back. I will say that our defensive system is unique, but it's a lot of it has been trial and error. How we guard. I've always said defense is a compilation. Offense is a compilation of actions. How are you gonna? What do you do to go get your baskets? Are you a heavy pick and roll team? Or you're an ISO team? Do you throw it to the post? You attack the elbows? I mean, when you watch film on teams, you always have a couple different options. Maybe you look at to guard this action or that action, and if they do something that hurts you, maybe you have, okay, if they're going to do that, then we'll do this. So it's being flexible within our defense, but a lot of it starts in recruiting. We have a system here, so we don't blindly go recruit. We recruit guys that we think we can get to guard the way we want them to guard. So there has to be a level of toughness there. And then I think the most, I think the hardest thing to teach in basketball is defense. But our kids have we start in June with, Quanta starts with position work with the guards. Kellen starts with the position work with the bigs, and they work separate from each other on their responsibilities. And I bring them together, and then I put the defense in on Fridays, and we do one action at a time. We get to where we can guard one thing, and then we get to another area, and then by the time we get to October, most of our defense in terms of actions we've covered. Now it's just a matter of honing it, making sure they understand what everybody's job is. And I've always said, I think you have to have more chemistry on defense than you do offense. When teams struggle guarding our actions, a lot of times they'll just spread the floor and drive, which is what the Sears did from Alabama. They just played ISO. I think they played ISO the entire second half with him. And a lot of times that's the smartest way to go. But your defense is always evolving, just like your offense is. It never stops. It never stops because you're always making adjustments and seeing how teams attack it, where they want to get their shots, and you're always making little tweaks here and there. But I don't know if I want to go into detail on how we do it.
Thank you, Joseph. We'll go to Chris Baldwin with Paper City, Houston, please. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Kelvin. What have you seen from Coleman Hawkins at K-State and how they're using him?
He reminds me a lot of when Don Nelson used to coach Golden State, and he had a point forward. He might have been the first one to do that. I'm sure he wasn't, but that I remember. I think that's probably the best way to describe Hawkins is he's a point forward. I think he leads them in assist. The ball's going to be in his hands a lot. He's got a very high basketball IQ, excellent playmaker. When they beat Cincinnati, he's a kid that's capable of getting a triple-double. He's a good rebounder, he's a really good passer. He's making his threes. I think he had 20 and can't remember how many rebounds he had, but he requires your attention. He's actually fun to watch. I watched him just last 2 days. I haven't really seen a lot of Kansas State this year. But just watch him the last 2 days. Coach Tang does a good job of getting him the ball in spots where he causes problems for the defense. And then on top of that, he's 6'10". So, he's not your atypical four-man. He's a point forward. If you go double him, he's good enough to find the open guy. They've got good players around him. Housen's the shooter. McDaniel's the playmaker. Max Jones is kind of a do-everything guy, good player. C.J. Jones, athletic, can really guard, get in the paint. Last game they played this big kid that transferred from Kentucky, 7-foot kid. He started him the second half, and they went 2-3 zone and played Hawkins and Gasson beside him. But Gasson is another tough matchup. I think their best player to date has probably been Gasson, but the most dangerous player is certainly Hawkins.
Thank you, Chris. We'll go back to Joseph Duarte, please. Go ahead, Joseph.
Kelvin, it's been since 1971 that Houston's played in Manhattan, but you've had numerous trips there from your time in the Big 12. Anything you remember about playing in the Octagon of Doom and what kind of arena that is to play in?
I'm sure if you go back and look at the scores of those games, a couple of them I remember, but I do know on Saturday afternoons, those K-State fans, I think, are special. I mean, that place seats around, what, 14,000? We've been in there many nights when there's 14,000. It doesn't matter how cold or how much snow. Kansas, Iowa State, Kansas State, Missouri, all those were stops that I made in the Big 8 and the Big 12 for a lot of years. But they all have great fan bases. You know, Kansas is world renowned. Iowa State's is world class as well. Missouri went. Of course, I coached against Norm Stewart and who's the coach that replaced him? Quinn Snyder. I think it was Missouri who we beat to go to our first Final Four out in San Jose. But what'd you call it? The Octagon of Doom. That's right. I do remember them calling it that. Great students. Their students will be back. That place will be packed. It'll be live. We're going to have to be ready to strap it on and play because you look how many times they've beaten Kansas in that building. And that building has a lot to do with that.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. We'll go back to Chris Baldwin, please. Chris, go ahead.
Kelvin, Emmanuel's embrace of those tough shots. He had another one, at the clock under pressure the other night. Does that remind you of any other players you've coached over the years? How he seems to relish those?
Nobody comes to mind. It just reeks of somebody that's made a living off taking hard shots. Emmanuel doesn't have a whap game where he's going to go by and get in the paint. So he's mastered the ability to find a window that's open, and if he can get the window open, if he can get that window open, and he doesn't need the window to be wide open because of his strength. But when he gets the windows open, he has a lot of confidence in that shot. So off the top of my head, I can't recall anybody else that has done it quite as good as Emmanuel. Maybe I have. I don't recall. I've had a lot of good shooters though. Armani Brooks was good at that. Armani was, when he had 20 against Kentucky, they were up in his face. But Armani was longer and more athletic, probably, or at least had a more athletic body than Emmanuel. And then Armani, I think, had a 6'8" or 6'9" wingspan. And when he got the ball back over his head, it's hard to get to it. So Armani and Emmanuel, obviously, has been our two best tough shot shooters or makers. Differences in shooters and makers.
We'll go back to Joseph Duarte, please. Go ahead, Joseph.
Did you see Quentin Grimes the other night? He in his post game, he was talking about his 9 boards, and he brought up you and sort of how you ingrained that in him, that part of his game. But I didn't know if you had seen the game or just kind of seen what he's been doing with the Mavericks lately.
No, I was out of town Tuesday night and didn't get back till late. Then last night we had the radio show, and Karen had something she had to go over with me when I got home. So I haven't seen an NBA game in a while. Who was Quinn playing against?
He played against the Lakers. He had 23, 9, and 6 assists.
He got 9 rebounds?
9 rebounds.
Good for him. Good for him. I think he averaged 1.5 at Kansas. So we had to look up rebound in the dictionary and explain to him exactly what it was, because he treated it like it was a foreign language when he first got here. But most of those kids at that position Armani was an excellent defensive rebounder. Damian Dotson, Kyler Edwards. But Quentin had the frame to be a good rebounder, and he was a willing learner too. And I think Quentin probably enjoyed adding those things. One of the things we constantly talk to our kids about is you all want to be professional players, but you've got to add things to your toolbox. If you get to where, I used to tell Quentin this, I said, Quentin, you got to get to where you can guard the other team's best player. You got to get to where you can average between 6 and 7 rebounds a game. And you got to get to where you can shoot 40% from the three. I said, if you can master those 3 areas, you can become a first-round draft choice. But if you only master 2 of the 3, you're just going to be another good 6'5" scorer. But he got to where he could guard the other team's best player. He got to where he could rebound, and he got to where he could shoot around 40% from the 3. And voila, he became a first-round draft choice. So good for Quentin.
We'll go back to Chris Baldwin, please. Go ahead, Chris.
Kelvin, having a deep team with different guys who could start. How important is that to making practice competitive and being able to raise the level of the team throughout the year?
Well, that was one of the things that's hurt us the last few years is our February and March practices. Like most coaches, our practices are cut down a lot once we get to conference play. I mean, you're not practicing 2 hours anymore. I mean, you may be working on slippage areas, or you may be working on execution or going over the game plan, how you want to guard it, or how you want to attack a team defensively. But, last year with Terrence out, Ramon was out for a while, JoJo was out. We just didn't have the ability to go 5-on-5. One of the things that helps us this year is I can throw Ryan Elvin in there on offense if we're shorthanded and work on our defense. Don't think for a minute I'm going to put Ryan in there to work on defense, but he's good to have as an offensive guy to go against our guys because he knows our stuff so well. So depth helps. I think it's probably more important now because there's no bye weeks. You just pray for health. I'm sure every team in our league does it. And if you can tell me how you keep guys healthy, I'm willing to listen. I haven't figured that one out.
Time for 2 more questions. One of them will go to Joseph Duarte. Go ahead, Joseph.
Kelvin, the bug that was going through the locker room, are you guys a little bit better coming out of that with, Cordell? And I think LJ was dealing with something like that. Is there any updates?
Yeah, LJ had a really high temperature. I don't think he's been out of his room in 2 days. I think he's going to try to do something in practice today, so he's been out. Cordell came back yesterday. When you play on Monday, then you have the day off. It just seems like it's such a short week. It's already Thursday. But we've got a couple of coaches with it. I think Coach Bishop had to go home, but it's making its way through the program for sure.
Thank you, Joseph. I have